spend the next 2 hours talking about some of these recent trends in noncompliance. Unfortunately, as we'll see, there's some patterns. We get a little more detail with some regulatory authorities than with others. Some have carried over for the last several years. We have provided the source of this material from the presentations that the FDA and EMA and others have put out, or their white papers, if you will. But we just wanted to pull out some of those key highlights. So they're there for your review. We have the FDA inspection metrics here for fiscal year 2016. We have the annual report from EMA. We have Health Canada's report. And you'll note some of these have a lag time in terms of what they are providing. And then we have the MHRA as well. So this came out in July of 2017, but reflects back from 2015 to 2016. But as we mentioned, we will see that these are similar in many ways. So our approach to impacting these and how we work in a clinical research community needs to be similar. It's very interesting that these findings, no matter where we're conducting the research, and we didn't incorporate HSA and those sort of places, but where we are conducting the research, whenever we have that engagement with an investigational product, a human research population, participant population, we are losing traction on some of these areas that are really considerable for us. We know that ICH E6 was updated in November of 2016 to incorporate information about quality management at the sponsor level. FDA came up with their quality or risk-based monitoring document in August of 2013, and then EMA came out with their guidance on the 18th of November of 2013 looking at quality risk management in clinical trials. And they really pulled down what we've been talking about from a quality risk management perspective in clinical research coming from manufacturing, ICH Q9, for example, or 21 CFR 820. So as we go through these findings, think about what you are seeing. And then we're going to, on the back side of this, talk about how we would respond to a 43, for example. Now, some of the other regulatory authorities have started posting information about their inspections and their outcomes. Health Canada, for example, TPD, has information about posting the inspection and whether they were compliant or they were not compliant. And I believe EMA, and I was looking for that link, I know I read it at some point, you guys might be familiar with it. EMA has a place where they're putting out their communications as well, like we see the FDA warning letters. So we're going to talk about those 43s and how we would want to respond to them and maybe how we shouldn't respond to them. And there's a lot of additional information in this slide deck about some warning letters where the responses weren't exactly what we had hoped for. And there was just recently one that came out last week, as a matter of fact, where the FDA went and down through the responses and said, you know, this is not sufficient. You can't address things this way because it's not going to work. So that being said, we're going to look, as I mentioned, these recent trends in noncompliance. We're going to do a critical review and analysis of those recent regulatory letters, those 483s, and communications, but we're going to look at the outcomes of these types of inspections. So we're going to review those findings. We're going to talk about areas of compliance concentration for regulatory authorities. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to say it, we are learning from these regulatory authorities what is of interest to them. There are always going to be those hot button topics, so to speak, but they usually give us a heads up. And quite frankly, the FDA has been cited for this by the Office of Inspector General by trying to teach us through guidance documents and warning letters rather than really addressing issues within the regulations. We've seen a gradual change in the regulations in some areas, but for the most part, we're reaching back to those guidance documents. And certainly looking at those warning letters to get a sense of what is the area of focus. Those guidance documents, those warning letters tell us how, for example, the FDA is interpreting regulations currently, but we know that there are other agencies as well. And with agreements that we see, we know that PMDA, MHRA, EMA can come here and do inspections just as the FDA can, and vice versa. So they are working towards sharing information, getting a sense of what's happening out there in our world so that ultimately we can all learn from that. We're going to talk about the factors that might be driving the present approach and what it may mean for our future compliance considerations. Again, what are we seeing, what is their focus, and how does that trend for us? We'll talk, as I mentioned, about those best practices for responding to the 483.